coach at Melrose, a couple of Orange Mound guys through and through. They were really excited to get kind of that two-headed monster of DeMarrais Morrow, Ryan Brown on the field at the same time, because around here to have two weapons that dynamic is a big, big advantage.
And Brown had 3 tuds last week in a 1-point tough loss to Mumford.
Yeah,
so,
and Mumford's always a good team.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back.
All right, that's Friday Football Fever for you. Coming up tonight at 10 on Action News 5. I'll be out at Whitehaven High School, holding it down with a preview in sports at 6. College front this week. I mean, what else needs to be said? The matchup we've been waiting, God knows how long for, at least a year. Certainly the anticipation has been buzzing since the start of the season. We are on the eve of Memphis, Florida State in Tallahassee tomorrow morning. It is, of course, the storyline that we beat to death, but rightfully so, because it's a really good storyline. Ryan Silverfield going up against his predecessor, his former boss, the guy who really took the Memphis program to heights they had never been before, Mike Norvell and the Seminoles. Now, this game is obviously a lot juicier and more there are a lot more unknowns going into this game because of how the season has started for both teams. Obviously, Memphis gets off that 2-0 start. They take care of business against North Alabama and Troy. We expected that. We did not expect the start for Florida State.
Yeah, I don't think any of us expected an 0-2 Florida State team to be hosting Memphis.
No, and I teased last week. I was really excited to talk about Florida State. I've pulled the numbers. They've really just it's hard to say anything but a disaster this year.
Yeah.
Last week 2 weeks ago against Boston College, really the final score was not indicative of that game because they got thrashed by Boston College and Bill O'Brien. Florida State, a couple numbers from that game. They were 3 of 14 on third down.
Yikes.
They ran the ball 16 times for 21 yards, which is 1.3 yards per carry if you're counting at home. They're putting up 17 points per game through 2 weeks. Of course, still a small sample size, 30% on third down. We know DJU has been lambasted across the media.
Good work.
He's only got one touchdown. He's only got one touchdown through 2 games, 6.7 yards per completion. And one more stat from the Boston College game, the time of possession was 39 minutes to 21 minutes.
Yeah, they had, I forgot the kid's last name for Boston College, their quarterback. He was looking like a... Castellanos, yeah. He was looking like a young Kyler Murray out there.
That was a big thing with Florida State. A lot of the hate gets put on DJU, and he has not been good, obviously. But they brought in so many transfers on this D-line, and it was talked about that this D-line
best in the country.
Best in the country, wreak havoc. And they got pushed around up front by Boston College.
Yeah.
Boston College ain't got nearly the dudes up front that Florida State has. And they get pushed around like that. Because when you go into this game against Memphis, the biggest thing you worry about when those P5, G5 matchups is up front.
In the trenches.
How are they going to match up front? Are they going to be able to run the ball? Are they going to be able to pass protect for Hennigan? But, I mean, if they're getting pushed around by Boston College, I guarantee Memphis is not that much different up front than Boston College.
I'd agree with that, especially with some of the guys that Memphis brought in. A returning guy in Xavier Hill, who was a preseason all-conference offensive lineman. Yeah, really, there are a lot of different facets to the story for Florida State. You mentioned the defensive line, which is wildly underperformed so far, especially compared to the expectations. Remember watching College Game Day before the Week 0 game in Dublin against Georgia Tech, and the crew there talk about they might have the best defensive line in the country. I have not seen a lick of that so far. Offensive line has also been bad as well. They do not look like the dominant unit that they're supposed to be. Because you talk about these SEC programs that are supposed to have these monsters in the trenches like you were talking about, and that really being the difference maker between the great and the elite teams. Florida State is supposed to have those same caliber of dudes, and they might. I know that the Memphis coaching staff certainly has plenty of respect for them, but so far that has not shown up on paper. DJU, I've said it a lot on different appearances here, radio hits, whatever, the last couple weeks. He just is what he is. He was not that great at Clemson, which you could say a lot about Clemson recently. And I've criticized Dabo. I think a lot of people have criticized Dabo Swinney for a lot of different reasons. But Clemson is a place where there have been a lot of successful quarterbacks recently. Am I expecting, should DJU have been held to the standard of Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson? Probably not. But is it reasonable to think he should have been better at Clemson? Yes. Goes to Oregon State, is what he is. And now I just think he's a guy. I don't think he's a guy that really elevates a surrounding core around him. Now, if you would have put him on last year's Florida State team where you had NFL skill position players everywhere, that's another part of this. Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, 4 skill position guys that are in the NFL right now. If you would put on that team, maybe a little different story. I know that Ryan Silverfield told us the other day that he has a tremendous amount of respect for the playmakers that FSU has. But it's hard to imagine. I haven't seen any of them look special so far, and they certainly do not appear to have 4, no doubt, NFL guys at the skill position players either.
Yeah, I mean, I know they got Lucas in from Indiana. He's really been the only guy that I've seen from them, the short, speedy guy, really make any sort of a difference. The thing with DJU...
Roydell came from Alabama, right? The running back.
Roydell.
He's looked okay,
Last thing about DJU, when I think back, do you guys remember in 2020 when Trevor Lawrence got hurt for that 2-game stretch? DJU played against Notre Dame, and I believe it was Virginia Tech, and he looked like that guy.
Yeah.
He looked like all world. And I think that was almost the worst thing for him.
That's the high school ranking.
The high school ranking, and then he came in for those 2 games and just dominated.
Yeah.
It put him, the expectations were so high.
Especially coming off of Trevor being so great.
Exactly.
Everyone just kind of assumed they were going strength to strength, and just really not the case.
Yeah.
For Memphis, to me, I want to see them pound the rock. I want to see Mario Anderson really set a physical tone tomorrow. Greg DeWosier, we talked about him as his new number 2 running back. Now it's Sutton Smith's out for the season. Liked what I've seen from him so far, but I also really want to see them establish a vertical passing game. We haven't seen as much of that in the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, part of that could be that they're holding stuff back against North Alabama and Troy. I also know that Ryan Silverfield said last week that Troy made a point in that game. You see it a lot. I imagine collegiately, definitely in the NFL, you play 2 or 3 safeties back, you take away the explosive pass plays. And as someone who was at the game last week at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, that win was going kind of crazy. Like, I literally watched the ball. I was in the back of the end zone. I watched Seth Hennigan throw to Rock Taylor on a deep post route, basically at the 5-yard line, maybe in the end zone. And I just watched the ball. It got to its apex and just fluttered from there. So the win was definitely a factor as well. But I think that they're going to have to take their shots tomorrow. They're going to have to get Rock Taylor or Demir Blankenship involved in a big way if they want to win this game. I'm excited for it. Florida State favored by 6.5 right now.
That game opened earlier this year at I think it was around 14.
Can you imagine a world where even 3 weeks ago we'd be sitting here saying Memphis is going into this game as technically the higher ranked team? Because of the AP poll, Memphis is basically the number 30 team in the country. They're the 5th team receiving votes outside the top 25. FSU ain't nowhere to be seen. So I understand from a bookmaker's perspective why FSU is the favorite. Still, the hype around the preseason. They were the number 10 team in the country. It's in Tallahassee. It's going to be a big game. But spam calls calling me in the middle of the show. But I'm just telling you, I don't think anyone should be surprised tomorrow if Memphis pulls this out. I'm not saying necessarily predicting that, although maybe I am. No, I'll go on record and say I think Memphis wins. I don't think it's a big win, but I think Memphis wins tomorrow because I just think that I think really the separating factor could be the cohesiveness that they have from years spent together, and FSU clearly does not have that right now.
Yeah, and going into this game, you thought going to Tallahassee, crazy environment, top 10 team. There's going to be a lot of juice out of that program. It's 11 a.m. kickoff. Yeah. They're coming off 2 straight losses. You just don't know what an environment that's going to be. It's not nearly going to be what you thought it was 3 weeks ago.
I also thought going into the season that this was basically a house money game for Memphis in terms of if they lose, unless they got blown out 70-7 or something like that, or even I don't know, if they lost by 35, that there's no way this game looks bad. And if you win, obviously, it does nothing but great things. It strengthens your case to make the college football playoff out of the group of 5. I still think that's the case, but a lot less so. It's not as much of a house money game. And now if you lose by 2 touchdowns, let's say, man, that might be a little bit of a state. Now FSU, it's a lost season. You don't want to get caught a bit too early. FSU could still get this thing turned around. But it's a chance for Memphis to make a statement tomorrow, no doubt about it. Really put themselves on the map because it feels like no one's really separated themselves out of the group of 5 yet. Obviously, it's so early in the season, but Memphis has a shot.
And at the end of the day, it would still be a loss against an ACC team, which I think the committee is going to weigh into that playoff bracket, especially since one of their top contenders for maybe that group spot is Boise State, who did just lose to a power team in Oregon. And that was a tight game.
In a game they should have won.
Mm-hmm. Is there any team in the country with more pressure on them this week than Florida State? I can't think of one.
I can't either.
I'm not sure there is.
I mean, it's almost a must-win for them if they want to get anything going this year.
It's already at disaster levels, but to lose to a Memphis team from the American Conference, it would be
Blow it up.
Yeah.
You start thinking, how long has Norvell got there at that point?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
the narratives would be really ugly, and I think we know the caliber team Memphis is, and I think Memphis got a decent amount of respect nationally. But like you said, it would still be them losing at home against a Group of 5 team from the AAC to start 0-3 against Mike Norvell's successor. So yeah, it would.
Right.
The narratives coming out of the game if FSU lose tomorrow are going to be real ugly. So 11 a.m. Central tip from Tallahassee. We'll have all the post-game coverage here tomorrow. Other games around the Mid-South. We got a couple. We got a nice little rivalry here because we got Mississippi State alum on running the show, and then Griffin is of course an Ole Miss alum. So we just hit on FSU Memphis. UAB, Memphis conference rival, traveling to Fayetteville to take on the Hogs. Riff, your Rebs hit the road for the first time this season to go to Winston-Salem to take on Wake Forest. Kent State hosting Tennessee, in what I imagine will be probably another tune-up game for the Vols. Vols looked really good last week. We'll hit on them in a second. And then Toledo going
Tricky
to
game there at the bottom. Let me tell you, man, that is a tricky game at the bottom. Let's start with that one because I think the other ones. I mean, Tennessee's a 49-point favorite. Arkansas is a 23-point favorite. UAB looked really bad last week against ULM on the road. They lost 35-3 or something like that. And Ole Miss should be able to handle Wake pretty well. It's going to be more of a test than the Rebels have seen.
It's like a 3-touchdown spread.
Yeah, I mean, the Rebels, again, Furman, FCS, and Middle Tennessee State, one of the worst teams in Conference USA. So definitely more of a test, but dude, that Mississippi State game against Toledo. Toledo's a good MAC team.
They're 10.5. Bulldogs are 10.5-point favorites. I actually liked. I didn't watch the whole ceremonious Pac-12 after dark. Bulldogs versus Arizona State in spirit. Yeah.
SEC after dark.
I like that they. Arizona State looked to be in control late, and then all of a sudden here come the Bulldogs with an 80-yard touchdown. With like 4 minutes left to get, you're like, this could get it.
They really did look like a completely different team in the second half. They couldn't stop the run for anything. So, I mean, really in year one with a new head coach, you're just looking for the positives. It looked like they were going to get blown out, and they didn't. So I take that game as kind of a positive. Arizona State is, a respectable program. It's not a terrible loss. You do expect to beat Toledo, though.
Yes.
Like Griffin said, Toledo is a good program, but that's one that you kind of have to get, and it's at home, and we'll see if the offense still looks good. We'll see if Toledo also runs all over them, but it'll be interesting.
Just one of those games because if you lose to Toledo and then you start SEC play right after that, that could be really detrimental because they host UF next week and talk about dumpster fire programs in Florida. The Gators are certainly qualified as such right now. But then after that, how about the top 2 teams in the country on the road in back-to-back weeks and the Longhorns and then Georgia?
Back-to-back weeks.
It would behoove the Bulldogs to win the next 2 weeks.
You got to win the ones that you can win.
Yeah, and I mean, Lebby, we've talked about it before. Lebby's an offensive genius.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was at Ole Miss offensive coordinator the year they went to the Sugar Bowl with Lane, with Matt Corral. That team was lighting it up every week. And then he went to Oklahoma and did the exact same thing, lighting up scoreboard. So I'm not worried about the offense for Mississippi State. Once he gets his guys in there, once he gets in the transfer portal next season, they're going to be rolling again. But like you said, the biggest thing with this year, just building that foundation. I think you saw the turn in the second half. It pains me to say it, but you saw a bit of a turn where they looked so much better in that game at Arizona State.
It almost looked like they were going to hit the counter punch, but they just kind of ran out of time.
Yeah, again, you get down so big at halftime.
And again, could not stop the run. That last drive of the game, I think, was 7 or 8 minutes. And
just
they were
ate the clock.
Just feeding the running back. I'm blanking on his name at the moment.
He went crazy.
They had a good win last night.
He went crazy last night, too.
Texas State.
Arizona State head coach. Where was he
Cam
before?
Scatterbo is his name. He was just...
Can we mention that real quick because it's been brought up a couple times this week? How loaded that Memphis staff was.
Yeah, I saw that
in those
too.
years they had in the early 2015, 2016 they had Mike Norvell, Ryan Silverfield, Dan Lanning now at Oregon, Kenny Dillingham now the head coach at Arizona State. I believe there's one more that I'm blanking on. Just a loaded coaching staff, especially on the offensive side.
For a American conference, you see those coaching staffs at Bama, Georgia, things like that. Those trees.
Yeah.
You never see it here. I mean, that's crazy to think.
Mike Norvell also originally was at Arizona State before he went out for what got him the Memphis job. But yeah, to be honest, I above anything, it's 2 weeks. It could turn, but the Bulldogs just look much more competent offensively than they did at any point last year under Arnett. So that is a positive in the right direction. I want to hit on your boys because, I mean, they look dominant so far.
Yeah, been dominant so far. Again, Wake's going to be a much better team than they faced in the past. Wake coming off a 1-point loss to Virginia and what was a crazy finish there, too. Yeah, I mean, offensively, it was a tale of two games. First game, threw it all over the yard. Yep. Second game, really pounded the ground. Lane said he wanted to establish that run game. He did just that.
Parrish, 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, 165 yards, 4 tutties. I mean, he was all over, which was really interesting because coming into the year, all the talk was about Ulysses Bentley.
Yeah.
Quinchon left. Everyone said Bentley, Bentley, Bentley. Parrish comes back after going to Miami for a year. And when Parrish was there, I was still in school at the time. It was Parrish, Jerry and Ely, and Snoop Connor. 3-headed monster. Parrish showed some real flashes, so I'm happy he's back. They're going to look good. It's going to be a much tougher test than they've seen so far, but I do think the Rebels will get out fine, and we can quickly hit on Tennessee because Nico looks unbelievable.
Nico Iamaleava, I think I finally got
looks
his last name
unbelievable.
I said there were 2 games last weekend that qualify as the most impressive win in college football so far this season. Texas going to the big house and really just stomping out Michigan from the word go. That was mighty impressive, even if Michigan lost a million guys to the NFL, including their head coach and their quarterback. Still, I think quality team. So that was impressive. And on the road for the Longhorns. But boy, Tennessee playing a ranked NC State team, neutral site game in Charlotte. But let's be honest, it was played in Charlotte. I imagine it was probably tipped a little bit to the Wolfpack's favor as far as the fans go. Man, just absolutely dominated that game for 4 quarters. Nico looked awesome. The ground game was really good. I mean, that looks like a team that's going to be very much, it's early, but looks like they're very much going to be in the picture for the college football playoff if they keep playing like that.
I mean, what's the SEC going to have? 5 teams? Georgia, Texas,
it could happen.
Bama, Ole Miss, Tennessee,
Yeah.
Missouri.
Definitely happen.
Yeah,
I mean, Missouri's right there too. I mean, you got 6 teams legitimately fighting for a spot.
I think, you're going to have probably at least five from the SEC. I bet you probably get 3 from the Big Ten. You got your Group of 5 champions. What does that leave? 3 spots. Big 12, ACC, and then one more. Yeah, and then that one more probably goes to an SEC or Big Ten team. So.
Yeah, I'll hit on it just real quick before we segue off college football. I know there's a couple Bama alums in the area. Big game for Bama this weekend. Started off slow last week against your boys.
My Bulls had them on the rope.
They did. They did. And then the second half they woke up. They go to Wisconsin in a very interesting SEC Big Ten game, 11 a.m. kickoff in Madison. I'm interested to see how they bounce back again. Kellen DeBoer just starting to get things rolling there. Still got Jalen Milroe, but definitely going to be a much tougher test on the road.
As someone who covered Badgers in my last job, I've not been there for any of the Luke Fickell era, but that was a hire that excited me when they first made it. Still kind of waiting for things to totally click now that he's got some of his own guys in there. Thought it would look a little bit smoother out of the gate. They are 2-0, but maybe not quite the offensive power that I thought they would be because I like the Fickell hire a lot. Real quick before we segue off college football, Arkansas 23-point favorites against Trent Dilfer and UAB.
The fighting
Arkansas
Trent
may
Dilfers.
have played the best game of the week last week against
shout out
Oklahoma
to
State,
that,
double overtime,
in
a game that they really probably should have won.
It's just Arkansas, man.
They had opportunities, but ultimately I think Oklahoma
you
State
look-
was just the more talented program,
And if you look at them
and they couldn't outlast it.
in the Sam Pittman era, that is what all their games have been like. Arkansas has just always been just right there in so many games against so many good teams, and it's just can't get over the hump.
Taylor Green looks pretty good at quarterback. You know, I just want to ask real quick because we were talking last week. We said how much a win could do as far as giving Sam a longer rope and potentially making his seat a little bit cooler. Does a double overtime L where you let most of the game help?
I think it
Not
does.
to the same degree, but it does.
There were
make it
some
a little
questionable calls at the end there.
I think it does because Oklahoma State is a really good program. I think they kind of had some big expectations this year, and it was really a game that could have gone either way. Like a couple plays here or there could have swung it in Arkansas's favor.
Yeah.
So they looked really good at times. They looked not good at times, but I think overall you're satisfied because I think if you went in expecting Arkansas to dominate that game, it was probably unrealistic.
Fair.
So.
All right, let's segue to hoops because a pretty big announcement coming this week involving the Memphis Tigers, the men's program. So we already knew that the women's program was going to host South Carolina, obviously defending national champions, powerhouse, dynasty, all the words apply. Dawn Staley and her girls were coming here to Memphis for an exhibition game. We knew that already. But now the men's team is going to host North Carolina on October 15th as part of it's a charity exhibition benefiting St. Jude. So the men's team will play the Tar Heels at 6 p.m. and then the women's team will play South Carolina at 8:30. It'll be at FedEx Forum. All of it is benefiting St. Jude, and really, I mean, just an awesome way to kick off the college basketball season for the Tigers. I mean, first and foremost, incredible event for St. Jude, and all the money that's going to raise and the awareness and all that. So that's number one. Number two, let's get a really early look at the Tigers, these new look Tigers, against what is probably going to be, I imagine, one of the better teams in the country, the Tar Heels. I mean, who knows college basketball, but in theory, that should be a premier team once again this year. To get an early look at them, it's going to be awesome. And then, like I said, obviously, when you bring in a program like the Gamecocks on the women's side, who have won three national championships now in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah,
I think it's 3. Yeah,
I think it's 3 in the last 5.
Yeah, and they won last year, defeating Iowa in the national championship game. Yeah, just I mean, that's awesome to get those eyeballs on the program, especially with what Alex Simmons is trying to build in year 2, leading the Lady Tigers. So yeah, I'm excited for that. That should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, UNC is going to be one of the best teams, if not the best team. They still bring back so many guys that feel like they have been there forever. RJ Davis is still there somehow. I don't know how that's humanly possible. He's been
shout
there.
out Baycott though, because he had the Grizzlies signed him.
Yeah.
He'll be at the Hustle this year.
I'm sure he'll probably be in attendance.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be a good sight to see, especially because you don't know what Memphis is going to be this year.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us know what product is going to be on the court between what has happened off and in the transfer portal and all the headlines. Who knows what this team's going to look like come this scrimmage. But, yeah, awesome event, cool to have in town, and, again, benefiting no better cause.
I think it's been the kind of the tea leaves, if you listen to what some of the St. Jude officials have said this week, is I think that they want to eventually expand this into a charity tournament of sorts.
Yeah.
Which would be awesome. Obviously, because it would be a bunch of powerhouse teams coming to Memphis. The Tigers, you would assume, are always going to be involved in it. And think of it as like a Maui or something like that. I'm not saying Memphis. Memphis is scenic, not quite as scenic as Maui, but one of these good preseason tournaments. If you could get, if you could get 8 teams here, 8 of the best teams in the country, benefiting St. Jude over a couple days, a weekend, I think that'd be really, really cool.
Yeah, if you squint your eyes, a pyramid looks just like a volcano. Can barely tell the difference.
Hey, the Mississippi River is just the same thing as one of those black sand beaches too.
Exactly.
The beautiful Mississippi River.
It's exactly the same. Hey, let's give a shout out on the women's side and talk about women's
Speaking of South Carolina.
Yes, and South Carolina. And maybe we're talking about the future GOAT in women's basketball. Asia Wilson setting the new WNBA single season scoring record the other night with a pretty good amount of time to go, I think. And I mean, this is just capping off her best season, a year where she was the leader of the U.S. team that won the gold medal in Paris. I mean, these numbers are
Those are crazy.
Unreal numbers.
silly numbers. And you think about everything she's doing offensively, the efficiency, and she's the 2-time defending league defensive player of the year. So I'm not going to act like I have as strong a take on the WNBA GOAT as I do like the NBA GOAT, but I think she's got to be very high in those discussions.
I think she is. I think
Already?
she is. And I wanted to throw this in the show because her numbers this year are just unreal. So to give a little context, she's going to win her 3rd MVP this year.
Yeah, everyone was saying Caitlin Clark. Respectfully, she's got some in her future.
Respectfully, no.
Not this year.
2022, Asia won MVP at 19.5 points per game, and she's at 27.3 now.
Yeah.
Career high in rebounds, almost 12 a game. She only trailing missed shot merchant Angel Reese.
He said it, not us. Get mad at him. He's not wrong, but get mad at him. He brought it up.
Yeah, and her other MVP, 20.5 points per game. So, I mean, I think she's probably the best scorer in WNBA history. She's an elite rebounder, back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year. She's probably going to win her 3rd straight this year.
Man, it's crazy. She's only been in the league.
That's a resume, man.
She's only been in the league for 6
That's a
years.
resume.
And we're
That's
talking about her.
nuts.
Yeah, we're talking about her.
I didn't know it was only 6 years.
I guess this will be her 7th season. She got drafted in 2018.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think some other players that would be in that conversation. I imagine, for me growing up, and I don't know if she's still in those go conversations, but for us, the first real WNBA superstar to me that I remember was Lisa Leslie.
Lisa Leslie, yeah.
Since then, obviously, Taurasi's been around forever.
Sue Bird.
Maya Moore, Sue
Yep.
Bird. But yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like
It's a conversation, but I think
Yeah,
Asia's
it
there.
definitely
Asia is in that discussion for sure. So
3 MVPs in 7 years.
yeah, and yeah, but I think that's the thing is that in theory she's got a long way to go. So yeah, impressive stuff. Although I hope that my New York Liberty get some revenge on them because they're the best team in the league right now. Because the Aces beat them in the WNBA Finals last year. So hopefully the Liberty get revenge on them or whoever's in the way this year and can bring a championship back to New York. Then maybe the Knicks will bring a championship.
The Indiana
back to New York.
Fever?
Let's not get ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah, come on, take it down.
Let's not.
All right, we can talk about another one of my New York teams, though. Let's talk NFL Week 2 coming up. Week 2 started last night. Man, first and foremost, just best thoughts and speedy recovery to Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously suffered another scary-looking concussion last night where he did the fencing motion with his hand. I've seen people throw out 4 concussions. I'm not sure what the 4th one is. I'm not disputing it, but certainly remember 2 from the 2022 season, including another one on Thursday Night Football where he did the same thing, the fencing motion. Now, that night, he was stretchered off the field. That was a really scary scene. Last night, at least he walked off. He looked to, you don't know what's inside his head, but he looked to have at least somewhat of an idea of his bearings and where he was at. So, but nonetheless, obviously a lot of discussions today about should he keep playing, should he retire. I'll just say, I'm not qualified to talk about brain health or how easy recovery from a concussion is or what the long-term ramifications are. I just hope that I'm sure he'll get the best care possible. I hope that he's listening to the best doctors possible. If they clear him to play and he wants to play, so be it. If he decides that it's not worth it anymore and he doesn't want to jeopardize his long-term health, I think that people should be more than accepting of that as well. But scary stuff nonetheless.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to say, well, this guy should retire.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
From the
easy for us
sidelines.
to say.
Yeah.
I can't really tell the guy what to do, but
Can any
I
of us read an
do-
MRI? Can any of us read a CT scan?
I do cringe every time he
Yeah.
takes a hit to the
Yeah.
head like he did last
I'm
night.
going to be interested to see if the NFL does anything. Because, again, the NFL has just harped on this safety.
Yeah.
At what point do they say, do we have to step in? Can they step in? What does that look
yeah.
like? I mean, it's
And
just...
you also wonder if maybe a guardian cap would have made a difference.
I was just thinking, I
Yeah.
would like to see him wear a guardian cap from now on because that would maybe
he should probably... Yeah, he should definitely wear one.
that would maybe alleviate some of the concerns around him at least a little bit. I will say too, it's not his fault. He's playing the game. My man, slide.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get it because when you lower the head, that stuff's
Yeah.
gonna happen. But yeah, tough. Also, Bills dominated that game even before Tua got hurt. That's
Yeah.
secondary, obviously, but Bills looked really good for 2 weeks. Their run game's awesome. James Cook went off for 3 touchdowns last night. Josh Allen, I put in a nice little Josh Allen MVP ticket before the season. He didn't have huge numbers last night, but to be honest, if they're winning, I don't know if it's going to matter.
Yeah, he looks-
The narrative is going to be that Josh Allen.
He
carried
really
them.
didn't need to show up last night
No.
because James Cook
Yeah.
carried them to
Yeah.
a victory.
And the defense had 3 turnovers
Yeah.
in like 3 quarters, so...
Again, this is secondary, but the Dolphins are going to play Skylar Thompson until Tua gets back, assuming Tua comes back, and they're cooked.
Yeah, Skylar Thompson. I don't know how they... I mean, he's not terrible, but like they just keep... Like Tua keeps getting hurt, and you just keep
Yeah.
putting Skylar Thompson in. At what point do you like, hey, we should probably invest in a backup?
You call back Dolphins legend Ryan Tannehill.
He's out there.
He's a free agent.
Danny. Oh,
Times.
gosh.
I don't know if that's that much of an upgrade. That's the start of week 2. I know we're a couple days removed from week 1. Anything you guys want to hit on from week 1? No, yeah, we
Just that a lot of quarterbacks looked bad.
we're going to hit on that in a second.
Okay.
We'll hit on
Okay,
that
I'll save it.
in a segment in a second.
We'll save it.
We do have in-state on Sunday. We have my New York Jets traveling to take on the Tennessee Titans at Nissan Stadium. Spoiler alert, this man will be anchoring sports on Sunday because I will be in the house in Nashville wearing my Aaron Rodgers jersey, hoping that he can score his first win as the Jets starting quarterback. I don't think they count last year when they won after he got hurt in 4th place.
Yeah,
So
I don't
think I don't know how that works. But
I don't
this
think
would
that
be-
counts.
This would be assuming he makes it through the game. This would be his first actual win as Jets starting quarterback. They traveled. They obviously lost on Monday Night Football, and Rodgers returned to the defending NFC champion San Francisco 49ers, 32-19. The final game was a little more lopsided than that, admittedly, but 49ers were really good. They go to take on a Titans team that was up 17-0
the Titans,
in
man.
Chicago on Sunday, and Will Levis. I've been on here saying that I had high hopes for him this year, but he just puked all over himself on the field.
Last week we talked kind of glowingly about the Titans, how they had gotten weapons around Levis, and they'll go as far as he can take them. And unfortunately, last week it wasn't very far. Extremely winnable game.
Cannot unsee the
Extremely winnable game that they did not.
The surrender cobra.
the surrender cobra
On the field
on
after
the field.
just one of the worst interceptions you'll ever see. And coming from a Jets fan, I promise you, I've seen some bad interceptions in my time. That was one of the worst. We do have to shout out Tony Pollard, though, Memphis native. 96 scrimmage yards, touchdown.
Looked good.
Looked really good in his first game for his home state team. So we'll see. My Jets did not defend the run very well on Monday night against the 49ers. On Grant, the 49ers obviously have one of the best run games in the NFL. I don't know if they have one of the best offensive lines, period, in the NFL, but they certainly have one of the best offensive linemen in Trent Williams over there at left tackle. So we'll see. I'm a little concerned with the run defense just because they let some guys go in the offseason. John Franklin Myers, Bryce Huff, Hassan Reddick, who maybe is never going to show up for work for the Jets. That's
What a sweet deal. Just don't go to work. Just never go.
The pipe dream is that we use in the trade for Devontae Adams when Devontae inevitably gets upset. That
Assuming the Raiders could ink him to a contract.
Yeah. That as well. But yeah, overall, listen, I think I said going to Monday night, I had such a weird feeling. It was like a PTSD from week 1 last year, Monday Night Football to start the season, where I literally said to myself, if Rodgers and all the other stars make it through this game without any catastrophic injuries, and we lose, but we lose in one piece, I'm fine with it. Although I will say, if Rodgers came out and looked cooked, I probably would have been pretty devastated on Tuesday. But I don't know if the mobility is going to totally come back or not. But the arm looked live. His throws, I mean, he still dropped a couple dimes on the sideline that reminded me, like, all right, this is still Aaron Rodgers, still the free play king. First passing touchdowns at Jets, Alan Lazard off free play. So overall, I'm pretty encouraged with how he looked, and I think that as he gets back into the flow of it week after week, that the offense could look better.
Yeah, it's 2024. Aaron Rodgers is throwing touchdowns to Alan Lazard for the New York Jets on an offside play.
So
if I told you that 10 years ago, you wouldn't believe it.
So you mentioned you're glad that Rodgers isn't cooked. So let's workshop a new segment called Who's Cooked? Any hot takes you want to fire off real quick, Griffin, or are you going to holster that?
Who's cooked? I mean, I have an obvious one. Can I get an obvious one out of the way?
I have 4 names. I think they're all going to be yeses, but so we already talked about Will Levis, so we'll get to him first. Will Levis.
No, I'm not out on him. I mean, I saw a take on Twitter this offseason, and it might. I'm starting to warm up to it more and more. He might be Jameis Winston on steroids. Like the arm, but just some horrendous decision making. It also gives me some talk about another quarterback that played in Nashville for a time. He gives me some Jay Cutler vibes. Not the personality, but
a little bit.
I think the difference between these guys is those two threw touchdowns. And
I'm going to say Will Levis is not cooked. I'm going to give him a little more time. Again, he came into a rough situation last year. I'm going to give him a little more time. Let's see.
How many starts?
Talk to me 9 games in, then he might be cooked.
How many starts has he had in his career? Let's look. Because here's the thing: the highs with him are really high. It's just the lows are really low.
Just the decision.
He's played 10 games. Yeah, I'm in a little bit longer.
So TBD on Will Levis, who's cooked. Let's rifle through this one. Deshaun Watson.
Absolutely
cooked.
super
He's
cooked.
cooked.
I don't think there's any debate there.
I was willing to give him a full off season, which was this past off season. First time really with no. Basically, last year I viewed it as this is his first full season with Cleveland, but he didn't look good last year. He got hurt. I said, okay, he's got another full off season with Stefanski and these guys. Let's see how it looks this year. And week 1 was about as bad as it gets. And here's the thing that's extra concerning to me is this is an offense and a coaching staff that has clearly shown over the last year that they can support good quarterback play. Because they called Joe Flacco off the couch last year and said, hey, buddy, we need a quarterback. And Joe Flacco was so good in like 5 weeks that he won Comeback Player of the Year over a guy that literally died on the field at the moment the year before. So clearly the offense and the ecosystem is good enough to support quality quarterback play, but Deshaun Watson just cannot do it.
Stack, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Deshaun Watson had a QBR of 9.
Not according to ESPN. That was a part of our next segment, actually.
Oh, God.
ESPN had him at 13.5.
13.5 for a QBR is absurd.
Here's the thing, man. The number one thing that stood out to me last week is like either he's just not seeing it quick enough, or Like the process, because
he's holding that thing.
Well, it's like 3 seconds. He goes through his reads, and then he's just playing backyard football. When clearly, like a Stefanski offense we saw last year has a lot of components of playing on time, and he's just not playing on time whatsoever. And let's be honest, other than Amari Cooper, I know that there are some people out there that still have hope for Elijah Moore. I do not, as someone who watched him, whose team drafted him. Out on Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, out on him too. Like, these receivers are not that good. And Njoku sprained his ankle. He's going to be out for a while.
Guy's always hurt somehow.
Yeah. And I guess to be fair to the Sean, this is supposed to be a team built around the run game when Nick Chubb is healthy and Jerome Ford looked pretty good. But yeah, man, he's I mean, this is like, I was willing to wait until this season to definitively say this is the worst trade in NFL history. It's the worst trade in NFL history.
Absolutely.
I'm
not 100% out on Jerry Jeudy yet, though.
To answer your question, he's cooked.
Yes.
And we've also, not to get too far down this rabbit hole, we said all those things about him as the player, and that is ignoring the abhorrent things we all believe he did off the field as well.
Well, there may be more upcoming.
Yeah.
So TBD on Levis, Watson cooked, Daniel Jones.
What? The only thing that keeps me from roasting Daniel Jones more is that my team employed Zach Wilson, who was a worse quarterback than Daniel Jones for the last couple of years.
I'm getting to the point where I start, like, one of the defensive linemen for the Vikings said it. You almost start to feel bad for him at a certain point. Like, he's so obviously pressing, and he looks nervous back there. Like, he just does not look comfortable in the slightest. And now you already have Malik Neighbors talking in the locker room. I did my job. I don't know what's going on back there. Like, that's...
If not for the Watson contract, Daniel Jones might have the worst contract in sports history.
So here's the only...
I think Daniel Jones is worse.
No, I don't think so. Because Jones, I think he got the Jones deal after this year. That's the only thing that saves it. The Browns restructured Watson's deal to the point where their dead cap hits for the next couple of years are like in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Or like
it's
over
worse.
100 million. The Watson deal is
It's always the Browns, man.
But and now, if they had signed Jones 4 years of guarantees, that might be a different story. But they'll get out of the contract this year. To me, if I'm a Giants fan, I'm concerned about... You hire Brian Daboll, who is one of the Bills' offensive masterminds for a couple of years before he got to New York. They go to the playoffs in year one with Jones. Everything looks good. And at a certain point, like, I get it, the quarterback play is awful, but I got to see something out of him to make Daniel Jones' life a little bit easier as well. And number one that comes to mind for me is, not to get too far down the nerd hole here, but you look at like wide receiver alignment data. The hardest thing to do as a receiver is to play outside, X receiver, and obviously Malik Neighbors can do that. But Malik Neighbors played from the slot a ton at LSU, and good offensive play callers in the NFL are doing things as far as putting their best wide receivers in position to exploit matchups, whether putting them in motion, giving them layup routes out of the slot. And instead of doing that, they had Wan'Dale Robinson just gobbling up targets from Daniel Jones last week.
Wan'Dale.
Brother, get Malik Neighbors the ball like 15 times a game and just see what happens from there. Because that's your best shot.
I know Tua got hurt last night, but before the injury, he had 3 terrible picks. I saw someone tweet that Tua is the Hawaiian Daniel Jones. Got a good laugh out of that one.
Daniel Jones, sorry, buddy, you're cooked. Last name, let's rifle through this one real quick. Bryce Young.
Oh, it's really bad. I'm willing to give him a little bit longer, but he is cooked adjacent. The only reason I'm willing to give him a little more time is because it was the first game under a new offense with Dave Canales. The Saints get a lot of jokes. Saints defensively have been pretty good under Dennis Allen. Obviously, their offense looked awesome under new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak on Sunday. But I will give Bryce Young a little more time. But if he plays the way he did week 1 for like another 6 weeks, I think you gotta put Andy Dalton in there.
I don't think you wait 6.
No,
if he looked that bad.
I'm going to say not cooked, though. I think his situation's an absolute disaster down there, and it's been that way for 2 years, and there's a lot that needs to be fixed. He was getting abused, a couple days ago.
Yeah, I like Canales. I like Deontay Johnson.
I loved Bryce Young in college. I thought he was such a great prospect.
I thought the Panthers made the right pick.
I'm still saying they did.
I think everyone...
I'm sticking to my guns.
Except for
who was going to take C.J. Stroud number 1 was Frank Reich, who was the head coach at the time, and David Tepper, maybe the worst owner in sports,
that
certainly
bridge.
up there. He said he overruled him and wanted them to take Bryce Young. So,
yikes.
So Bryce Young, we're going to go with TBD on him. Cooked adjacent, not cooked. we can revisit on the next edition of Who's Cooked.
Who's cooked?
Who's cooked.
All right, finish it off with some trivia. What do we got?
I got a few trivia questions for you guys. So let's rifle through these. So Ashton Genty for Boise State.
Yes.
You guys been watching him?
Yep.
He's receiving some early season Heisman Trophy candidate talk. Boise State has just played in 2 games. They defeated Georgia Southern, and they narrowly lost to Oregon. How many rushing yards does Genty have in 2 games?
I'm going to say
I'll give you a hint. He leads the nation by a lot.
I'm going to go in 2 games. I'm going to go 475.
I was going to be right. I'm going to go 485.
459
Okay, a little closer.
in 2 games.
That's 230 a game, basically. He's going to be
Yes.
very good at NFL right now.
Tied for second in FBS, Cam Scatterbo of Arizona State and Kyle Monangai of Rutgers with 373.
Are you,
so
baby?
he's
Shout out.
About,
So
he's about 80 yards above
You know
everybody
what you
else.
reminds me of? Aaron Jones.
A little bit, yeah.
That's a good comparison.
Excuse me, Aaron Jones.
All right, a couple more. Speaking of cooked, Deshaun Watson and Bryce Young, this is according to ESPN, they had quarterback ratings of 13.5 and 12.3 in week 1. Last year, sorry, Matt, the worst qualified passer in the NFL in QBR was Zach Wilson. What was his QBR?
Over the course of a whole season.
Knowing that the worst 2 quarterbacks last week were under 15.
I'm going to say that, man, Bryce and Deshaun last week were like equally as bad as Zach some weeks. I'm going to say Zach Wilson's QBR last year was 17.
What you got?
20.
It was 31.3.
Oh, okay.
To give you some context on just how
That's
cooked
so bad.
Watson and Bryce Young were in week 1.
That's still really bad.
Wilson also had the worst
Had to get that
quarterback
out there.
rating in 2021, but in 2022, Baker Mayfield was the worst. So there could be hope.
When Baker
There could be
was
hope
The
for
Bake Show,
a
baby.
rebound. Carolina
Baker was with-
and
man.
the Rams.
Man.
See,
Shout-
maybe
shout-
Carolina's the issue, not
shout-
Bryce Young.
Shout out Baker, man. He looks awesome right now. Tore up. I mean, the Commander's secondary is
Yeah, he looks
horrendous.
he
but
looked great. Okay, so Malik Willis is in line to start this week for Jordan Love.
How you feeling?
TBD.
Cook to
Malik
Jason.
Willis has thrown 67 passes in the NFL. He has yet to throw a touchdown, which would tie for the 9th most all time if he retired now. What is the record for most passes thrown in a career with no touchdowns?
Oh my God. How many is Malik Willis at?
67, Malik Willis.
I'm going to go 210.
Okay.
150.
Very close, 154.
Bye.
That was Mike Krukzek. You guys know him. He had 154. Later went on to become the head coach at UCF from 1998 to 2003. Krukzek, you'll remember, he was the quarterback at Boston College in 1975, where he threw for 6 touchdowns and 7 interceptions.
In a season?
Yes, that earned him a second-round draft pick by the Steelers, where he filled in for injured starter Terry Bradshaw, and they ripped off 6 straight wins,
Oh
where he
my
didn't throw a
God.
touchdown pass.
Look at that.
Terry Bradshaw, wildly overrated. Different discussion for
Okay, so a little baseball to end our show here. Luis Arias has not struck out since August 10th.
Yep.
That's more than a month.
Padres second baseman.
Yes.
He's playing first right now. Infielder. We'll call him. Yeah.
I haven't been paying attention that close. The MLB leader in strikeouts right now is Ellie De La Cruz.
Oh boy.
How many times has he struck out in that span?
Since August 10th.
Yes, in the span where Arias has not struck out at
Okay,
all.
so Ellie hit a massive slump for me for my best fantasy baseball team in the middle of the playoffs. Got me eliminated, or at least contributed to it, so I know that. So I'm going to guess it's a lot. August 10th, so he probably played in like
31 games.
31? He has struck out 75 times.
I was going to say 60.
You guys were way over, 41.
All right, he's not that bad.
But 41 compared to 0, that's
still
what
wild.
we're looking at.
I would, for the record, take Ellie over Luis Arias in a heartbeat, but neither here nor there. I know that might make some of the
There are
bad
many
guys,
play styles. That's
There
why
are
the,
many.
the game is so beautiful.
There are some better than others, but that's just my thoughts on that. All right, loaded edition of Fast Five Sports today. Thank you all for tuning in. We've got Friday Football Fever coming up tonight, preview at 6, and then the full thing tonight at 10. We will be back here next Friday, at least Jacob and I will be. Hopefully you will too, TBD.
We'll see if I'm cooked adjacent.